Questions, questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier of the Quebec nation said today that the Liberal government's decision to double the number of temporary immigrants, bringing it to 600,000, will imperil social services for Quebecers. Will the leader of the Bloc Quebecois listen to what the Premier of the Quebec nation is asking, who is asking that the Bloc Quebecois not support the Liberal government next week, and that they support the interests of Quebec and the Quebec nation? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to say that, like you, I used to be a page in the House of Commons, and I'd like to thank and welcome the new cohort of pages. We know that their responsibilities and services are extremely important. Thank you for being here with us. Now, it's laughable what the leader of the opposition is saying. He's saying that we should cut, and cut to help Quebecers, including in health care, child care, and so on. Thank you. Before moving on to the next question, I'd like to remind all members that it's important that questions have to do with questions of this government's administration in order to address issues of responsibility here in this House of Commons. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. It's not just the Premier of the Quebec nation, but also the PQ in Quebec that is condemning this centralizing, expensive government. He said that this government voluntarily destabilized Quebec, and that's an abuse of power by the federal government. The Bloc Quebecois is propping up a party that is abusing Quebec, according to the PQ. Why has the leader of the Bloc Quebecois abandoned the Parti Québécois and all Quebecers to keep the most centralizing prime minister in history in power? Once again, and with great regret, this is a matter that has nothing to do with the federal government. That said, I see that the Minister of Canadian Heritage is rising. The Honourable Minister. We know that the last time that Premier Legault decided to become an ally of the Conservatives, we know that Quebecers had their say about that. They didn't like it at all. And we know that Mr. Legault and the leader of the Parti Québécois want to destroy an incredibly important institution for Francophones in Quebec. I'm talking about Radio-Canada. We will always fight for our culture and for Quebecers.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Prime Minister has lost his Quebec lieutenant. He's going to run at the provincial level. But luckily, he's found another Quebec lieutenant. That's the leader of the Bloc Quebecois, who will be voting to increase spending by $500 billion in inflationary spending. He's voting to increase the size of the public service. He's voting in favor of a government that has broken the immigration system. In fact, it is the Conservatives who are the real defenders of Quebec.
we all knew that the NDP leader had sold out the people and signed on to a costly coalition with this carbon tax prime minister to tax people's food, punish their work, double their housing costs, and unleash crime in their communities. But he claimed that he had torn up the carbon tax coalition so that Winnipeggers would not fire him in a by-election. But as soon as the votes were counted, he betrayed them too and taped back together this carbon tax coalition. How can anyone ever believe what he says again?
The chair is in a very uncomfortable situation here. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The NDP leader was terrified he was going to lose a by-election in Winnipeg, a NDP stronghold. So he put out a Hollywood production where he claimed he had torn up the carbon tax coalition onto which he had signed up, that he was going to stop fighting for his pension and start fighting for the people. But once the votes were counted, he betrayed them again. He is a fake, a phony, and a fraud. How can anyone ever believe what this sellout NDP leader says in the future?
Colleagues,
Professional manners.
colleagues, order. Colleagues, there are some long-standing traditions of this House which we should endeavour to respect. It is important that we ask questions in question period to make government accountable to the people of Canada. The questions, by their very nature, should be pointed, should be tough, should be specific, and the answers should also be clear. But colleagues, for this to work, we also have to make sure that we work within the rules that we have. There were some important questions which were asked, but were not related to the administration of the government. And therefore, there weren't responses to that. And it is important to make sure that we do that. We have so many other tools available to us as members to make the comments that we need to make outside of question period, to comment about how we want to do. Now, while the microphone was off, there were, I would suspect, although the chair didn't hear that, there might have been some strong words which were exchanged between members. I ask members to please remember that Canadians are looking at us. and let us conduct ourselves in a way really befitting of each of our constituencies and the country as a whole. So, avec cela, on va...
So with that in mind, let's move on to the next question.